Welcome. If you're a woman who has a sense that there's more out there for you, you're in the right place. I'm Whitney Baker, host of the Electric Ideas podcast. Somewhere along the line of work and kids, life carried on, but I lost track of my truth. I'm on a reflective journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. Each week, I interview a woman who is lighting her own path and offering others hope. Before our conversation ends, we'll share a reflective question for you to explore. Sometimes all we need is a jolt, a fresh idea, an aha moment that connects us to a sense of possibility. This, my friends, is what I call an electric idea. Welcome back to Electric Ideas. I'm your host, Whitney Baker. To my North American community who is celebrating today, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you're surrounded by good people and good food. I'm so excited to welcome Dara Kurtz today to the show to speak about gratitude, which is very timely for today and this time of year. Dara is a writer, speaker, and creator of a platform called Crazy Perfect Life, where more than 200,000 people follow her journey around the globe of choosing gratitude, even when life gets messy and challenging. Dara is known for her books, I Am My Mother's Daughter and Crush Cancer, as well as her write-in journal called Living with Gratitude. One of the reasons I really wanted to connect with Dara is because we share a belief that gratitude can be much bigger in your life than a seasonal reflection. It can become a daily practice that brings a lot of depth and vibrancy into our lives. I know this episode is going to leave you feeling grounded and like you have an eye out for what matters most this holiday season, even if it's not the easiest of times for you. So let's dive in. Hi, Dara. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So you had at one time a great job and what seems to be kind of a happy, stable family life when your world got pretty turned upside down with a diagnosis. Can you start by just taking us back to that time in your life?
Sure. When I was 42 years old and had a career as a financial advisor, I had two kids at the time who were 11 and 14, happily married to my college sweetheart. I went to the doctor and heard the words, "You have cancer." And it really did come out of nowhere. I mean, one day I was fine. And then the next day I was hearing words like surgery, chemo, radiation. And my whole world literally blew up in that second, in that moment.
I feel like when I was reading about your story, I just got goosebumps because I'm 43 and my girls are 11 and 12. And just that perspective and the fact that it just came out of nowhere. I feel like hardships have a way of clarifying what truly matters in life. And yet in this kind of middle age, when life's filled with home, kids, pets, careers, you name it, a lot of people feel really tethered to responsibility and maybe not like it's ever the right time to make a change. I'm wondering if you have any advice for not waiting to live the life you want to live.
So you're right. Going through a big challenge like the one that I faced absolutely does impact you. There's no way I think you could go through something and not be changed. And so after I went through the surgery and I did need to go through chemo, I was 42. I wanted to be as aggressive as possible. I did all the things. And after I went through that, I got to the end and the doctor said, "Okay, Dara, go back to living your life." And I realized that A, I didn't know how to live my life anymore. And B, the things that I thought I wanted didn't really seem important to me anymore, specifically my job. And before I got sick, I loved my job. I definitely struggled with work-life balance and tried to find a way to sort of work part-time. I put that in quotes, give up things, try to figure out a way to kind of navigate all the challenges. And we could do a whole episode on work-life balance. But at the end of the day, I didn't want to go back to thinking about money all the time. I'd always wanted to be a writer. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to start my blog, which I did, called Crazy Perfect Life. And I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have an assistant. I, was used to being able to delegate when I didn't want to do something. And all of a sudden I was like doing all the things. But I also trusted that little voice inside my head that had always wanted to be writing, that this was my time to do it. And I just sort of looked at what I had been through as a opportunity to have a restart. And if I, in my opinion, didn't take the lessons that I learned on that journey and have the courage to sort of make those changes, in some ways I felt like it would sort of be for nothing. And I know that sounds really cliche, but I do think there are always lessons for us to learn, regardless of whatever situation we're facing. And so I was listening with both ears to my internal voice for the first time in my life, more so than I ever had before. And so I think that's sort of what prodded me to make those changes. And the reality of it is, if I hadn't gotten sick, would I have done it? Probably not, because I checked a lot of boxes on my report card of life, if you will. Like you said initially when we started this conversation, I had a great career. I felt really good about what I was doing and my title and what I was making and, blah, blah, blah. And it's hard to walk away from what society tells you is success.
Yeah. A lot of work I do with my clients is reconnecting to that sense of self and inner voice. And I love that it feels like for you, especially after going through something major, you just really couldn't deny that inner knowing anymore. And you also had the courage to listen. I think that's half the battle. It seems like also, your definition of success has actually evolved over time. Today, more than 200,000 people follow you and share your journey of what you call creating a crazy perfect life. So, what's your new definition today of what a crazy perfect life even is?
My definition of success 100% changed because I realized that I was done with making life choices based on what society told me success looked like. And success to me absolutely looks different today. I mean, it's more about what feels right and what brings me joy. And are my priorities in line with the way I'm living my everyday? And it's all fluid, right? I mean, we make decisions and we live our lives, and then something else happens, and then we make decisions and we live our lives, and that we have to be flexible and, blah, blah, blah. But, recently, after my book, I Am My Mother's Daughter came out, which was during the pandemic, which is always challenging to have your first like big book come out during the pandemic, I started doing a lot of speaking, first on Zoom and then in person. And I had this program called Level Up Your Life and Thrive. And I still do it, but I realized about a year ago, I was speaking and I was talking about how people owed it to themselves to make sure that they were living their priorities and that they were really being intentional and that they were not living based on what their parents or someone else has told them they should do, but they were just listening to that voice inside their heads. So, anyway, after that, I went home and I thought, this is very interesting because a few days later, and this was towards the end of the year, someone had said to me, Dara, do you make New Year's resolutions? What do you want for the year? What do you want for your 2024? And I thought, and I said quickly to them, I, want to finish my fiction book. I want to sell my fiction book. And so when I finished that speaking event and went home, I was thinking about all this and I thought, this is very interesting because I'm literally telling people to live their lives based on what their priorities are. And my priority is to finish my fiction book. And I am not spending any time writing because all of this speaking stuff has sort of, kind of, I'm not going to say sort of gotten in the way, but it just sort of I got really busy and I was accepting more speaking things. And then that takes a lot of time. And then anyway, and I thought, this is the end of the year. If I want to make finishing my fiction book a priority, then I'm going to actually have to A, decide that I want to practice what I preach, but B, I'm going to have to give up some things. I'm going to have to make a hard decision. And so I really spent some time like thinking about this, just journaling through it, like taking walks and, asking myself, what do you want to be doing with your time? Because I do believe time is our most precious commodity. And that's a whole other thing. But at the end of the day, I realized, yeah, I'm going to make some changes. And so I really started saying no to speaking things. I really built in writing. And it wasn't like 2 hours a day, it was like 5, 6 hours a day. It was finishing this book. And I'm so excited right now to be able to tell you that my book is done. I'm working with an amazing editor right now. I'm about to take it out and sell it in January. And that was all intentional decision making, giving up things, but defining success for myself and choosing what I wanted to be doing and recognizing that we don't get everything we want at one time. And I have no regrets. And I'm so grateful that I had the courage to do that, but it wasn't easy. Nothing's a guarantee. There are risks involved in everything. And my speaking was at like a certain level. And I was like, we can let fear get in the way of every decision. Am I going to lose things? Am I going to be able to get it back? What are people going to think? Blah, blah, blah. So fear is always there, whispering in all of our ears. Even if people say it's not, they're lying. Of course it is, It's just, what are we going to listen to?
That resonates with me so much because I know we're both strong believers in living with intention and making sure that if something is really important to you, it's got to show up on your calendar regularly, whether it is even like playtime or taking care of yourself. I feel like in this day and age, if it's not scheduled, it's probably not happening. So I love that you embodied that. I just also wanted to reflect back. I think that one thing that's really helped me, I'm in a different place in my career right now, but in order to grow and really feel like I'm getting to the things that matter most to me, I've had to say some important no's. And it's really hard when I have momentum and I'm like, oh my gosh. But I just have had to trust that opportunities aren't gone forever if I say no, because we only have so much capacity.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly what I was experiencing. I had a lot of momentum going, and I was afraid if I said no, was it going to come back? All of that. But yeah, if we don't honor ourselves and we don't listen to what we truly want, I mean, it's so easy for distractions from so many places, even if they're good distractions, even if they're distractions that at one point maybe your younger self thought you wanted. It's nice to be intentional. It's nice to remember that you can make decisions based on your intentions, and it's okay to say no.
I think that's a great reminder towards the end of the year too, to kind of look at your calendar and be like, what do I need to take off, postpone, say no to make space for what's going to make me feel really good in terms of accomplishing what I want to before the year ends. So thank you for that. I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to talk about gratitude. I know that it's Thanksgiving time in the United States, and people use this time of year to maybe reflect on gratitude, maybe take some time to appreciate what they're thankful for. But you really teach how to live with gratitude and make it a daily practice, not just something we think about from time to time. Can you start by telling us about that?
Yeah. So, first, I want to say that I'm not someone who has spent my life living with gratitude. It was something that I had to learn the hard way. And right after I had my first daughter, and my daughter was a few weeks after I had her, my mom passed away. And I was in my 20s. It was a really hard time for me. And instead of letting myself feel all the feels and focus on the grief, and this was 25 years ago, actually, on November 14th. And so people weren't talking about it like they are now. There weren't platforms out there and a lot of books available. And so I just dove right in, back to work, back to distracting myself. I didn't want to think about all the sadness. And I felt like I had this new baby. I owed it to her to be happy and put on a face and pretend like everything was great, even though obviously it wasn't. And it wasn't until I went through breast cancer and got to the end of that I really struggled with waking up every day and trying to figure out how to get through the day. That was really hard because I wasn't someone that sailed through chemo. I felt terrible. I felt sorry for myself. Why is this happening to me? My kids, I felt so much guilt about what they were having to go through, just all of these things. And I had a really hard time making peace with everything. And that's when I really did a lot of work on myself, tried to read every possible thing I could get my hands on, started going to counseling. Like I had two counselors, they didn't know about each other. I mean, like all the things. And that's really when I started to understand what it meant to feel grateful for what you have, not understanding that that doesn't mean that you have everything that you want or that life is perfect. It basically just meant like, okay, I'm going to wake up, and even if I'm feeling anxious or guilty or struggling, I'm going to actively choose to think about what I'm grateful for right now in this moment. And at first, when I started trying to practice living with gratitude, because it is a daily practice, I didn't really even know how to do it. And I would think, okay, I'm grateful for my doctors. I'm grateful to be on this side of things. I'm grateful that the nausea medication's working. I'm grateful that my hair is starting to grow. I wasn't happy that I lost my hair. I wasn't happy that I was feeling nauseous. So it was really hard to come up with things that I felt like I was grateful for. But something happens when you start to think about life that way, when you practice looking for things that you can feel good about. Your mind sort of has this shift. And then as you start to travel through your day, your mind automatically goes to the gratitude space. You can take a walk and, oh, wow, it's such a pretty day. Look at that tree. It's beautiful. Wow, I just had such an incredible conversation with someone. I'm so grateful that they're in my life. And what happens is like you shift your mindset, you really start to notice the good and you build momentum. And it just becomes a daily habit because you rewire your subconscious mind into noticing what you're grateful for and counting your blessings instead of focusing on what isn't working or what you don't like. And let's be honest, planet Earth is a hard place to be right now, right? I mean, we could literally sit here and make a list of all the things that we don't like right now. It's not hard for anyone listening to do that if you choose to do that. But at the same time, I propose that it's equally not as hard to come up with things that are working in your life, that you like about your life, that you can be grateful for, even though life is not perfect, because perfection doesn't exist. To me, that's really what living with gratitude is. It's basically intentionally deciding to look for the good and count your blessings instead of focusing on what you don't like and what isn't working. And with gratitude comes joy. The more grateful you are, the more joyful you feel. The more grateful you are, the more joyful you feel. And it feels good to be happy. It feels good to feel joyful. And so, I think that just sort of spirals.
I really deeply agree with how you articulated that because I similarly have had those shifts where it's not about pretending that everything is perfect at any given moment. It's not about, yeah, it's never going to be perfect. And it's not about acknowledging the anger and grief and all of those important emotions. But I do think when we regularly practice being on the lookout for good, being on
Yeah.
the lookout for magic is what I like to say, we encounter it more.
100%. And I just want to say to your point that I don't subscribe to toxic positivity because I believe that whatever you're feeling, you have a right to honor those feelings. And we're not talking about trying to shut down any of your human emotions. What we're doing is when we practice gratitude is we are again being intentional about focusing on things that we like, that feel good, that make us happy, that are joyful, instead of focusing on what isn't working and what we don't like. And it's okay to not be okay. You just don't want to stay in that space. And so when my mom passed away, I really did get stuck in that space. Why did this happen to me? It's so hard to have a baby and not have my mom, just so many things. And then when I got sick, it was really, again, why did this happen to me? History's repeating itself, so much fear there, blah, blah, blah. And I realized that I did have a choice. And so I think that was really empowering. And to everyone listening, whatever you're going through, you actually do have a choice. You get to decide right this very second how you want to feel. And if you want to feel better, practicing gratitude is a really good place to start because it doesn't take a whole lot to do it. It's free. You can do it wherever you are, and it works. It really works.
You've written, and I quote, living with gratitude can be the difference between living in black and white versus living in color.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I love that quote. It's so true. So we can go through our lives and we can cross things off of our to-do list. We can focus on, what we should do, or we can go through our lives with our eyes wide open. We can notice the beauty, the blessings. We can pay attention to them. We can let ourselves feel them. And to me, that's really what color is. Like living in color is like the icing on the cake, right? It's not just having a piece of the pie, but it's like taking the time to savor it and enjoy it. And to me, that's what living in color really is. And so that's what I meant when I said that. You can live in black and white. You're going to go through your day. Either way, we're going to go through our days, right? If we're lucky. So again, do you want to choose to live in black and white or do you want to choose to notice the colors? And I love color and I'm going to choose.
I do too.
Yeah.
I know that holiday season, especially, can be really tricky to navigate for some of us. A lot of people are dealing with a tough diagnosis, which I know you can relate to, or grief of a friend or a family member for the first time during the holidays. What would you tell someone in this position who is traversing a holiday with something kind of big and hard going on in their life about how to perhaps stay positive or hopeful and maybe let in some joy during the holiday season despite the circumstances?
I don't think it has to be an either or situation, meaning I don't think that we have to say, okay, I'm going through a really hard, challenging time. I'm going to feel sad. I'm going to focus on that. Or it's a holiday time. I feel like I need to make myself be happy. I want to experience, the holiday season. I think you can feel different emotions at the same time, meaning you can be frustrated or sad or anxious about a particular challenge. And while feeling that way, you can also decide that you're going to try to help yourself make the most of your holiday season. And so, I mean, that's really, I think, takes an intentional, active decision. And also, you have to recognize that I think a lot of times when it comes to the holidays, we have this picture in our minds of the way things should be, or we want the perfect holiday season for our kids, or, it has to look a certain way, or we want everything to be wrapped a certain way, or we need the perfect present, or we need to make the perfect dinner. And so I would say toss all of that away and do what feels right in this season of your life. So if you're going through a challenging time and you want to order dinner for a holiday, great. Order dinner for the holiday. If you don't feel like giving gifts to people, don't give gifts to people. If feel like you don't want to be around a certain group of people because they're all happy and you're not feeling happy and it's just going to be a lot of pressure, then say no. I think giving yourself permission to recognize that if you're dealing with a especially challenging situation, you don't have to do things the way you've always done things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you can also let yourself enjoy a little bit, even while experiencing a challenge. And for people who have lost a family member, for me personally, like the first year of all the holidays, like every holiday was so hard. I just remember feeling like, oh, we got through Thanksgiving. Great, check. And then here comes the next holiday and then the next holiday. And so it's going to be hard. And it's okay to cry and be sad while trying to celebrate a holiday at the same time. But I think it's also really good to bring it. And so I really looked for ways that we could bring my mom into different holidays, different things to make me feel like, and to make my kids feel like she is part of our lives. And so there's a lot of different things that you can do about that. I talk a lot about that in my book, I Am My Mother's Daughter. Again, I think the most important thing to realize is just that there's no rules. and to honor however you're feeling. But also, you're going to be missing out if, put your head under your pillow and don't come out for 2 weeks. Because again, if time is our most precious commodity, like, is that really the best way for you to navigate that time? And if the answer is yes, that's what I want to do, then you know what? Great. Let yourself do it, but just make that decision intentionally.
A conscious decision. Yeah.
Conscious decision. That's right.
Of all of the kind of family traditions, especially, we're right at that holiday time. After your recovery, is there anything that you're like, I've never liked this, I don't like this, and we're just not doing it anymore?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I changed a lot after I went through breast cancer and got through that year. And I really did change a lot. And not everyone around me liked the new Dara. I would say, some of the biggest things were if I didn't want to be around someone and if I felt their toxic energy and they didn't make me feel good about myself, I gave my permission to, say, guess what? I don't want to be around that person. And I really pulled back. I was really intentional about that. Same with letting go of trying to feel like everything had to be perfect when we had people over to our house and the house had to look a certain way, or, the food had to be presented a certain way, or, I just felt like just letting go of all that really, you go through a cancer experience and you really realize like, life is so fragile and anything can really happen. I mean, turn on the news today. Anything can happen that we don't even think about, right? Like life is so unexpected. It just really made me decide what I wanted to focus on and gave me the permission to let go of all the things that I really felt like I didn't want to focus on anymore.
Do you have any suggestions? I know that your relationships come into clear focus. And like you said, you're kind of maybe shutting people naturally that just don't like you up. But I think, especially you're a mother, sometimes it's hard to feel like you're making quality time for everybody and with your friends and the people you want to see, especially after you're recovering and you're thriving and you're living your crazy perfect life. How does that look like for you? Like, how do you prioritize relationships?
So the relationship with my kids and my husband are my priority, period. No discussion. Meaning I will give up easily. For example, I play mahjong a couple times a week. I mean, I'm addicted to it. If you haven't done it, it brings me joy. I highly recommend it. But one of my daughters is in college. The other one is already graduated from college. If they're coming home, I'll miss anything to be with them, to spend time with them. When I'm writing, I talk to my daughters usually at least once a day. I'll pretty much stop what I'm doing to answer their call. I mean, to me, that is an intentional decision, but my relationships with them mean everything to me. And so I think you just kind of have to know what your priorities are. Same with my husband. It's really hard to let life get in the way and to not connect with the people that you love on a daily basis. But for me, I really try to connect with the people that I love every day, even if it's like a 5-minute phone conversation or just a text message or a funny picture selfie that I send. I mean, technology provides us with a really easy way to stay in touch with people that we care about, but I have a very clear picture of the people that matter to me, and they will come first over anything no matter what. And I have definitely made sacrifices that I don't regret at all because of that.
I know we're coming up on time, but I feel like women can just be really hard on themselves. You seem to be very self aware. And, we talked about the sweeping changes you've made in the last decade or so of your life. What's your advice to women for choosing to be more deeply self loving and self compassionate in a world that can be harsh, in a life that can have harsh events happen at any time?
Yeah. If you don't love yourself, you can't expect anyone else to love you. And if you don't make yourself a priority, you can't expect anyone else to make you a priority. And so that really gets down to, okay, how do we learn to love ourselves? how do we do that? And so, self-care is such a buzzword, but to me, self-care, I know there are going to be some people that might not agree with me, but I love getting a massage and a manicure and all of those things. But to me, self-care is really the act of showing yourself self-love, which is really more about like going deep in terms of like connecting to your soul and really thinking about what you want from your life and giving yourself the permission to go after it and asking yourself those hard questions and making time every day, even if it's like a 5-minute journal entry to ask yourself some of these questions to help you figure it out. So I would say learning to love yourself deeply, unconditionally is so important. And if you are feeling like you're not sure how to do that, the best way to start is grabbing a journal and asking yourself some questions and writing what you like about yourself and thinking about what you're grateful for, who you are, and all that you've overcome and all that, you admire about yourself. And I think that's a really good way to start that conversation. But if we don't do the work, and it's not easy, and no one can do it for you, but if you don't do the work, you can't experience the benefits that doing the work can bring. And, I think that's really so important is just figuring out how to love yourself. And it's not easy, particularly in society when we scroll through social media and we compare ourselves to other people and, we feel inadequate. And we as women, we don't always support each other. We make it so much harder for another woman because that's a whole nother podcast episode. But um, I think it all starts with just how we talk to ourselves and, that little voice that we have inside ourselves, how what we say to ourselves matters more than probably anything else we can do for ourselves. And so if you aren't practicing positive self-talk, that's another great place to start in terms of the how to grow your self-love toolbox.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you for that reflection. I always end my podcast with one final chance for listeners to reflect. And so I will ask you in the areas of cultivating gratitude as a lifestyle and developing a life that feels self-loving and truly meaningful, what's one question women could be asking themselves more?
I would say, ask yourself, what do you admire about yourself? Right this very second, for everyone listening, what do you admire about yourself right now today? And what are you grateful for overcoming? Or what challenges have you gotten through and you really are grateful that you were able to do that? Write a paragraph out right now. I am grateful for blah, blah, blah because blah, blah, blah. And keep that somewhere. And whenever you start to doubt yourself, or whenever you start to not feel adequate or enough, or the world tells you that you're not enough, go back and read that and let it serve as a reminder to be grateful for who you are, for your body, for what you've overcome, and have hope for all the things that are to come. And the best way I think to really do that also is to feel grateful for what you've had and grateful for the possibilities of what's to come.
Beautiful. Dara, I know that my community is going to want to read your books and find you and continue to learn from you. Where can we find you?
Thank you for asking. Instagram at crazyperflife and my blog, crazyperfectlife.com, and on Facebook at crazyperfectlife. So those are really the places that I hang out. And I love getting messages and emails and all the things. So feel free to check me out. And then, of course, my books are on Amazon or can be found at your indie bookstore, probably.
Great. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you joined me today. If you're looking for more, feel free to connect with me on Instagram at @WhitneyWoman. And if you enjoyed the show, I invite you to support me by leaving a review or sharing it with a friend. Hope you have an inspired day.